Welcome to the Modern Nomad Podcast. If you question your current reality and want to escape the 9-to-5 grind, then this is the show for you. And now your host, me.
What is up and welcome back to the Modern Nomad Podcast. I am your host, Kyle Kennedy. In today's video, very different. It's going to be a story time because I've been gone for 2 months. I went to Costa Rica, Colombia, Miami. I moved from Tulsa to San Diego, so there is a lot to catch up on, and that starts right now. So I live full time in the back of my van now, but that's not the video we're making today. That's going to be next week. Today we're going to be doing a recap of Costa Rica and Colombia. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to put some B-roll everywhere, but we're going to start off with me leaving Tulsa. So I had 2 layovers in order to get to Costa Rica. I ended up sleeping in an airport, and that video on TikTok and Instagram went viral, so apparently I'm known for sleeping in airports, which has happened 4 times in the past, 2 months, which isn't fun. I don't recommend spending over 140 hours in an airport, ever. So when I got to Costa Rica, my buddy Nick had already been there for a few hours. We ended up getting a hostel together, and then the next day, the ladies joined us. We picked them up in our 4x4 rental by Nomad America. This thing had a rooftop tent, all the supplies you needed for cooking or cleaning or anything for camping. It was a really fun time. It got us through some rivers. We actually drove through rivers, and it got us through the mountains and everywhere all over the northern coast of Costa Rica. We pretty much stayed on the east side and then up north and then back down through the west side of the entire country, and it was an absolutely beautiful time, and thank you so much for that vehicle because it was freaking incredible. Some of the most memorable things about Costa Rica was fruit smoothies everywhere. They're fresh, they're delicious. Now I crave them all the time, and I don't have a blender in my van, so I'm kind of screwed. I gotta go buy them. Another thing is we did sing-alongs in the road trips every single day. It didn't matter what song it is. I felt like everyone in the car knew every single song on the radio. And another thing was I went to Costa Rica knowing a little bit of Spanish, and I came back knowing a little bit more. It was so easy to get around in Costa Rica because people know English enough to speak with you, and most people are fluent in Spanish and English. Makes it so much easier than in Colombia. I barely could speak with anybody because their Spanish was a little bit different than what I knew, and none of them actually knew English enough to communicate. Now, one of the first adventures that we went on, we were just driving through the streets, and we found this super cool thing called the hanging bridges. Basically, you pay $30 per person USD, and you go to these incredible bridges that are probably 150 feet off of the ground, and you're suspended there, and you just get the most incredible view of Costa Rica. And it was raining the entire time we were there, so our camera gear was not as safe as it should have been, but it was really fun to get out there, walk across the bridges, get really cool photographs, and have a lot of fun. Now, if you find yourself going to Costa Rica, you're probably going to go to the beach. That's one of the biggest things in my life. I'm not a mountain guy, I'm not a foresty, I'm not a desert guy. I'm a beach person, and beaches are literally everywhere in Costa Rica. So we found some private beaches by accident. Our Airbnb was probably 2.5 blocks or city streets away from the actual beach. So we drove down there in our 4x4 and no one was there. We actually got to set up our rooftop tent, hang out, do some drone footage, do whatever we wanted to do on the beach because absolutely nobody was there, and it was beautiful. And that's not the only private beach we found. On the last night, we stayed on a private beach as well that we found on iOverlander, and it was in somewhat of a sketchy area, but when you're in Costa Rica, sketchy is a little bit different than it would be in America. So you're still safe there compared to where I'm from in Tulsa. It gets really sketchy. And besides the rooftop tent that we camped in a couple times, we actually stayed in Airbnbs. All of them were super unique and very fun to stay at, very clean and not expensive whatsoever. Something else we stayed at was my first hostel experience, which was in Tamarindo, and it was a really cool Selena hostel. This had events all day. They had yoga, they had breath work, they had pool time, they had a nightclub at night. Everything was really fun and planned out, so you honestly didn't even have to leave the hostel if you didn't want to. And by far my favorite place that we stayed, it wasn't anything about what we were staying in, it was about where we were staying. So this was the middle of nowhere in this A-frame building. It was an Airbnb, but the backyard had monkeys playing around in the trees, and it was such an incredible thing to see that wildlife. Those are wild monkeys. They're not at the zoo. These are legit living in their natural habitat, and we got to see them out of our back window, which was I can't even explain how cool it was. Earlier I mentioned that we stayed in our rooftop tent on the last night on a private beach. We ended up doing a campfire right on the beach and cooked a massive red snapper, and it was such a good meal. It was probably my favorite because we worked hard for it. No, we didn't catch the actual fish. We ended up buying it, but it was a process because the people there didn't speak English. So we went into it kind of blindly, and no one accepted cards except tarjetas. That's how you say it. Do you accept cards? But we finally found one place that did, and they gave us the biggest fish because they said it was going to be the best tasting one. But we cooked that and we hung out, and it was in a little bit of a sketchy area, but it was a private beach, so who can complain really? So me saying the last night in Costa Rica was camping out on the beach is not actually true because we slept in an airport again in Costa Rica the final night. So we slept downstairs. There was no one around. We ended up showering in the bathrooms and cleaning up. It was kind of fun, but kind of risky because we didn't know how well we could get away with it. But we did wake up to the police telling us that we had to leave. Like, what are you doing here? Why are you here? When's your flight? And for some reason they asked me. I don't know why they targeted me. There's 4 of us, but they asked me. So I just took the roll on and I was like, oh, our flight's at like 8 a.m., which it was. And I didn't actually make the flight. Everyone else made the flight. They had their vaccination cards and all of that stuff. There was a little drama for them too, but I'm not vaccinated, so I had to get a negative COVID test, which I did, and it was the wrong one. They did not accept the one that I chose to take, even though that's what it said on the actual website. They needed this one, and I didn't make it. So later on that day, I'm sitting there trying to figure out how to get there, getting COVID tests, finding a new airlines to take, and I ended up taking another airlines and finally made it to Colombia, which ended up being on Christmas Eve, which was a great Christmas present because I was greeted by everybody. They had another camper van. We rented a camper van by Maui Camper Vans, and it was super cool. It was very small for how many people we had, but it was very fun. So we ended up in a very, very cool spot in Bogota, and it was very sketchy to drive over there. We had a stick shift. It was fun, but not so fun. And we ended up finding this incredible restaurant, and everyone disappeared while we're sitting there eating. And the thing about that was, being in Colombia and people disappear at a restaurant, maybe something's going wrong. But we saw everybody going out back. So why wouldn't they go out the front door? So I followed them. We all followed them. And we start hearing counting down from 10, 9, 8, all the way down 3, 2, 1, and then fireworks everywhere. So we had fireworks because it was Christmas. It was literally like the 4th of July and the New Year's met in America. It was such a fun experience, and it was by far my favorite memory of the entire trip because we found this place just because we were hungry. It was like 11 o'clock at night. The only place open was a restaurant that had loud music going on. It was actually a private party. We walked in, no one spoke English, but they were super excited to see us. For some reason, they started handing us wine, handing us a bunch of stuff like tiny cookies and bubbly and all sorts of stuff. And it was probably my favorite memory by far. So we wake up, it's Christmas Day, we leave this kind of sketchy Airbnb. Wasn't my favorite, actually it was the worst in my opinion. Everything was falling apart and nothing worked, but we ended up driving 6 hours to the most incredible Airbnb I have ever seen in my life. It looked like this, and it was my style. As you can see behind me, everything's modern. This home was modern, and it was only $200 a night, split between 6 people. That's cheap. So we only got it for a few days, but then we ended up loving it, and we extended the stay by another few days because this place in San Gil was incredible. It was right on the top of a hill. We could see the entire city. If we needed to go down to the grocery store, it wasn't that far of a drive. The traffic there kind of sucks, but everybody on Christmas Day was out and about and having fun in the town square. They had lights everywhere, a huge party. They celebrate Christmas way different than we do in America, and I am there for it. I freaking loved it. So I mentioned we stayed in this incredible Airbnb for a few days, and the reason we did this was, one, it was Christmas and we wanted to relax, but after traveling in Costa Rica nonstop, different cities every single day, we needed to reset and just basically do nothing for a day or two and have fun with each other, have a few drinks, cook some good meals, which I cooked them all. Thank you all for actually doing the dishes. I didn't have to do anything after dinner. And then on the next day, we were ready to go and have some fun. So our first adventure was whitewater rafting in Colombia, which was very intense. At one point, we actually flipped the entire raft, and it was kind of scary for a few. This has happened to me before in a whitewater rafting situation, so I was very cool, calm, collected. Noticed everybody else was kind of freaking out, so I just yelled, lay back, kick your feet up, trying to give everybody some good commands. That way they know what to do while they're waiting on the raft to come back and pick them up. So the next day after that, we reset. Some of us needed a little bit longer to recover than that, but we ended up going to a ropes course, and usually I'm kind of scared of heights, but I don't know what came over me. I was racing everybody. I was running across these zip lines. I was doing all sorts of weird acrobatic stuff, jumping over there. And then I ended up jumping off of a 250-foot waterfall and rappelling as fast as I can, just all the way fast to the bottom, and stopped myself really fast, and it jerks you, and it was so fun. I absolutely love it. Would do it again. Something about Colombia that is needing to be mentioned is coffee there. Coffee's good. Black coffee's delicious. But everybody that I was with does not drink black coffee. They drink coffee that has ice cream in it and cake frosting. Like, what? You guys just ruined it. I mean, I would eat the icing and the ice cream, but not put it in my coffee. It was weird. Don't do that again, please. I beg of you, do not ruin good Colombian coffee with ice cream. Please. Never again, all right? And so Colombia, we got a lot of really cool photos, a lot of good footage. It's just all on vertical for me. So that's why I'm making this YouTube video in a horizontal explanation way now, is because I need to figure out how to actually vlog rather than always doing TikToks and Instagram. So if you want to see the actual travels, go to my Instagram, kyles.vanlife, or TikTok, kylesvanlife, and check it out. You can see everything that actually happened in detail. It will basically explain everything in much better ways. That way you can get a good visual other than all these B-roll shots here. Now, once we are getting ready to leave Colombia, Spirit Airlines is the absolute worst. And let's just put it this way. We missed our flight even though we were early to the gate. They closed the gate, and then the plane took off 7 minutes earlier than it was supposed to. It was overbooked, and they gave away our tickets just because they could. And then they didn't want to refund us or do anything to help us out. It took about 3 hours of me, Sarah, and Nikita in the back going full Karen on them to get a flight the next day. So we ended up having to sleep in an airport again in Colombia. Here I felt super defeated. Everything in life just seems to pile on at once. So everything about my life was in my mind because this was the worst possible occasion. We were going to miss New Year's in Miami. We had huge plans in Miami. Nikita ended up buying a flight to go back home to Denver. Sarah and I had to wait, and we had to go to a different part of Florida. We flew to Orlando because it was the only flight to Florida, which was the next day. Once we got to Orlando, we rented a car and we drove to Miami. I got to Miami at 1:30 a.m. So we missed New Year's. We saw fireworks and everything along the highway, but we didn't actually get to spend the same amount of time in Miami that we wanted to. And if you want to see the more trouble with Spirit Airlines, you need to go to Sarah's YouTube channel, Sarah Shamblin, because she had even more trouble with them the next day. She didn't make it home. She had to stay in Miami for 4 days because there was no more flights back to Oregon, and Spirit Airlines screwed up multiple times. So if you guys are ever thinking about using Spirit Airlines, just don't. They're trash. Absolute trash. But I hung out with my friend Janessa in Miami for a few days, so I ended up going over to Little Cuba, which was fun as all can be because she's from Cuba. So she ended up teaching me a bunch of really cool stuff. We went to Domino Park, saw a bunch of really cool graffiti, and just did pretty much whatever we wanted for a few days. And then I went back to Tulsa, where I had 4 days to pack all of my stuff up, move it into the van, and leave for San Diego. So that brings us to today, where I currently live in San Diego full-time in my van, and there's going to be a video about how I got here next week. So hit that like and subscribe button. That way you can see the actual journey I took to get here.